I don't expect you to believe me just merely because I say it. Believe me because you actually take the initiative upon yourself to verify the things I've been saying. I've been encouraging people to do that for the longest time on my channel. If you don't believe me, go to the videos I'm referencing, and I always cross-reference in my videos. I've been doing that for the longest time on this channel. Some of the videos I actually did, I started recording, and then I would flip and blip to the last video or other videos or older videos. But I'm not. I don't want to do that every single video, and I don't care to do it, and I never have. Care to do it very much. So that's just how it's going to be. And this is more, and that's so this, and on the positive side, this is more motivation for my viewers to actually, verify or make the effort to think about things in a more flexible way, to actually follow the instructions and take the advice I've been giving for a very long time on this channel. Follow my advice. But in the end, yeah, that's pretty much what it points to being. So I do apologize for giving misinformation once again on this channel, but that about consciousness, and I mean, obviously, it's one thing to say that it's bad enough. It's bad enough that that these major world religions say that consciousness or that the soul can exist inside of a location, since it just really cannot. But it's another thing to say that it can't use the senses when in fact it can. I mean, I did argue that it can use the senses. You have to remember, I was arguing that it can using paradoxes. But if anything, what the evidence shows is that the evidence actually shows that it wouldn't need it wouldn't have to be a paradox for it to be able to use the senses anyway. If it really is using the senses the way we use the senses, then that's just, that's not a paradox, because the senses is consciousness, and without the senses, there is no consciousness, and there's no, and thus there's no soul. So, because the soul is consciousness, so it's not a coincidence. So ultimately, that's the problem I've been having. One of the problems I've been having for too long on here. Okay, so with that said, I can finally leave you with that. Now look, I don't think this is really going to. The other thing is, on top of that, I really don't think this was ever going to convince anybody. I don't think I'm convincing any major world religion person or regular person, or this would have convinced anybody in history. That's the other reason why I lacked so much motivation back then to think about things on a deeper level about my theories back in the earlier parts of my channel. And that's one of the reasons why I got this wrong in the first place. That, this idea that the soul cannot use the senses without it being a paradox. It's just not very motivating when even if you were right, nobody would believe you anyway. I mean, practically no one would believe you. And not only that, but it just wasn't as important as my own personal issues were at the time anyway. I had way more personal issues when I started this channel than now. If you can't already tell, and if you just look at the progress in the quality and the logic of the arguments, So, but yeah, I mean, that's about it. I mean, all I can say is that, I mean, I could show you pictures if you want, It doesn't change. This doesn't, of course, change the fact that the soul cannot exist inside of a location, I mean, obviously, it would stand to reason that if the soul could exist in a location, it actually could. Then the senses actually are physical. But since the soul cannot exist, inside of a location without it, I mean, at least not without it being a paradox. I mean, given that that's the case, I would, it's fair to say that it doesn't exist inside of a location, and thus, but if the soul is consciousness, and there's no consciousness without the senses. since the senses create thoughts and thoughts are consciousness, then therefore, it's very good. It would be very good to assume that the soul does not exist inside of a location without it being a paradox. Therefore, the senses and thoughts are not. I mean, the senses and thoughts are one and the same, but they are not. But if the soul uses them, then that's a paradox. If those are physical, but if they're not physical, the senses and thoughts are not physical, then they must be what the soul is. They must come together to form the soul. They must be the components of it, and thus they've been having it wrong because they've been saying that. So it's really way worse what the major world religions are doing with this entire idea. They've been putting out far worse ideas about consciousness than I have, and I've been proving that for a long time on this channel. But as for which is worse, to be brutally honest, between the idea that the soul can exist in the universe or in a location and the notion that the senses are physical, I mean, I'd say it's far worse to assume that the senses are physical. I mean, first of all, you can't even assume the soul is in the universe unless you first assume that the senses are physical. Well, I mean, not necessarily, because it depends on what you believe the words mean. A lot of people have believed that the soul does not use the senses, and then there's been a lot of people who believe the soul does use the senses. But anybody who really understands what the senses are, that they are and most people in history have been asserting and using this brainwash argument that the senses are physical. That's what the majority has always agreed upon in history, and yet they'll use that to argue that therefore the soul is used. But if the soul still uses the senses, and it must, then therefore it exists within the universe, or it exists inside of a location. However, ironically, ultimately what all this shows is that, atoms do not produce the senses. And so it's so ironic when they say, oh, well, the soul is beyond the senses, or consciousness is beyond the senses, or God is beyond the senses. But, which is so stupid, because the senses is consciousness, and it is the soul in the first place. And they're saying that the soul is beyond itself, and they don't even know that's what they've been saying all this time. So no, consciousness is not beyond the senses. It is the senses. And the soul is not beyond the senses. It is the senses. Whereas, so if that's the case, then it surely does not exist anywhere. The senses do not exist in the universe. They do not exist in locations. So, it's just the brainwashing that the major world religions and the majority of people and humans in history have been putting forth about how about how all that stuff works. That atoms can do magic. When in fact atoms cannot do magic. They don't do magic. So now ultimately, that's a great. This has all been great, but I have another video to produce today, to put forth on this channel today. I think it's going to be very, very, very a very good video, and So don't think I'm going to have this video be like the last video of the week, because I'm going to just come up with another video. I'm going to make it right after this one, after I publish this one. I mean, upload this one, whatever. So, yeah. So do yourself a favor. Don't do your research for yourself. What can atoms do? You know, and then you'll see that atoms cannot produce the senses. So, well, anyway, I'm done here. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, share, subscribe. Bye.